Hey there, ladies and gentlemen. This is homework 4.5. We hadn't had a normal homework in a while. How about that? So let's get to it. Let's talk about the homework. Let's talk about the processes. Let's just talk math because we love math. At least I love math. We all love math right now. So we have this problem, and we should read it. And I'm going to go ahead and read it, but you should read it too. About an MP3 player. So Anthony and his sister Ciara are saving money to buy a $240 MP3 player. That's going to be kind of in what the iPod Touch range. They each plan to buy their own player. Awesome, because they can't share something like that. Anthony starts out with $50 in his bank account, and that's $20 a week. Ciara starts off with $10 in her bank account, and that's $30 each week. Complete each of the tables below based on the information given. The first table has been started for you, and we're going to answer the questions below. Okay, so looking at Anthony, we actually have this kind of laid out, but we should probably take a second and mark out some important information about Anthony, which I'll mark in yellow. So Anthony, okay, let's see, Anthony starts off with $50 in his bank account and saves 20 per week. And Ciara, which I'll mark in red, starts off with 10 in her bank account and has 30 each week. And those things will actually help us a little bit in the way of informing how we're going to actually form this. Now, if you look at the information from Anthony, 15 is a bank account, 20 each week. You can kind of see those things played out in the process. So we have 50 in our bank account. We see that kind of starting out our value each time. $20 each week. Well, $20 for week 0, $20 for week 1. And we can kind of get a clearer sense how this is going to look in this next iteration. Whether we're following the process, thinking about it logically, we're still going to have the $50, which you started out with way a long time ago. And now we're going to add $20 for the second week. Here's $50, and here's going to be 20 for the third week. 50 plus 20 for the fourth week. 50 plus 20 for the fifth week. And 50 plus 20 for the eighth week. Okay, and I'm going to maybe put this in parentheses. Make it a little bit easier to see. Somehow, inexplicably, it shows yellow. And if you're wondering where I'm getting those numbers, I'm just looking here in the week column, okay? Now, of course, if we keep all this process going, bam, we'll have $50 plus 20 now for the 10th week. And that may or may not be enough, but let's go ahead and total this up. Now, we're going to use a couple different processes here. We could just go ahead and or actually perform the operations here. 20 times 2 is 40. 40 plus 50 is going to be 90. But we can also acknowledge that we can see a vertical pattern of 20, and we even have been sharp enough to point out that if that's our multiplication each time, that's going to be our vertical climb. So whether we want to actually work this process column out carefully or simply add another 20, 90 plus another 20 will be, 110? So this will be 130, and let's see, that'll be 150. And we can confirm that by multiplying those things out on the left, but I'm pretty confident that's going to be right because we have this plus 20 vertical climb. Now, that's not going to work in terms of the plus 20 anymore because we're not jumping just 1 week anymore, we're jumping 3 weeks. So you couldn't infer that means if we're jumping 3 weeks at 20 per week, we're jumping 60, making our total 210. But we can also just work this out. So 20 times 8 is 160. 160 and 50 make 210. Either way is good. So the jump here should be 60 because that's 3 weeks. And here's a 2-week jump, so that jump will probably be 40, so that'll be 250. So lots of ways we can work out that table. Anyway, that's what we got for Anthony over here. Now Ciara, we don't even have a process to start out, but we do have some information. We have 10 in our bank account, 30 each week, which sounds awfully close to 50 in our bank account, 20 each week. So that kind of lays out what our process is going to look like. So we start out with 10 in our bank account, and we're going to add $30 for every week that we're actually saving. In this case, we save for no weeks, which means we're starting at 10. $10, 30 for the first week, that's going to be 40. 10 plus 30 for the second week, that's going to be, what's that, 70? 30 times 2 is 60 plus 10 is 70. But again, if we know we're saving 30 each week, that's going to be that vertical climb reinforced by knowing that's a multiplication. So this should be plus another 30, that makes it 100, plus another 30, that makes it 130, plus another 30, that makes it 160. Here now we're jumping Now we're jumping 3 weeks, so I'm going to surmise that's going to be plus 90, one for every week that we jump. 160 and 90 should make 250, right? Yep. And then that should be a plus 60 jump, which would be 310 bucks. Now we can back that up by looking at the process here. So we have 10 plus 30, 10 plus 30 times 3, times 4, 10 plus 30 times 5, 10 plus 30 times 8, and this will be 10 plus 30 times turn. And again, working that out in the process column can confirm what we already had by patterning, but you can see the advantage of using a pattern, certainly. So now we got a state and algebraic rule for Anthony, one for Ciara. X stands for weeks, and then Y represents total dollars saved. So if we jump in here, the thing about a rule is if we do the process column, the rule kind of writes itself. If you look at this process column, every single time we have this 50 plus action, and we have the 20, and then we have these numbers here that we don't consistently know. Well, the number that we don't consistently know we'll use as a variable, which will be an x, making Anthony's rule, the total amount saved y is equal to 50 plus 20x. Okay, let's slide over here to Ciara. We're going to do the same kind of analysis. Again, we have this part here that we always see, so our rule will start with 10 plus. We also have this always plus 30 part, and it seems like the part we don't know, the part that constantly changes, is going to be our variable part. We'll use that in x, so we have a rule for Ciara that's y equals 10 plus 30x. Right. So we're going to use the information in the tables to create a graph for the situation. Graph the data for Anthony and Ciara on the same set of axes, scale and label, and just do basically arbitraring. So first thing we have to do is figure out what goes on x and what goes on y. Weeks will go on x mostly because it tells us right here, but also we know that's an independent variable, and we have to get to 10. So let's do a quick count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Well, that fits beautifully. So the bottom, which we'll call our weeks, will go by ones. Awesome. Okay, so that makes our cash, our money, to go along here. Now we have to kind of take a look at our maximums. Anthony only gets to 250. His sister gets to 300. So I probably want to graph out to at least 3 or 350. So let's figure out what we can count by. What if I make this 50? That would make that 100. That make that 150. That make that 200, 250, 300, 350. Awesome. Okay, so now let's actually graph this thing out. And what we have to do is realize what kind of shape we're dealing with. Let's go yellow for Mr. Anthony over here. Well, Anthony starts out at 0, 50. So that's where I'm going to start out here in yellow. And then we have 1, 70. Now, we're just guessing here. 1, 70 should be in that area-ish. 2, 90, so 2, 90 should be about right there. In fact, they kind of overshot, I think, with that. So that should be about right there for 1, 70. Let's see, 3, 110. And you kind of see this pattern for 150, and that's a very definite point. So we 8 and 210, which should be roughly right here. And then 10 and 250 be right there. In fact, I might have overshot a little bit because we can kind of see we're looking at a straight line for Mr. Anthony. And I think that you're going to see the same thing for his sister. Although his sister is going to start a little bit lower on the chain. She's actually going to start at 10 bucks. Okay. Let's see. 1 is 40, so not quite there. 3 is 100. That's a definite point. 4 is 130. Well, we're catching them. 5 is 160. 8 is 250. And something has happened here. And then, let's see, 10 is 310. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and connect these points with a line, and that's okay to do. It's not necessarily correct in this context, but it'll help us kind of compare. especially when we're asked to answer questions here below. So use this information to graph it. Did that? Okay, so use this graph to answer the following question. Is there a time when CR and Anthony and CR have the same amount of money? If so, state how much. Okay. Now, if you're looking at the graph, it looks like it's going to happen somewhere in the vicinity of week 5. But the thing to kind of keep in mind is I was doing this by hand, and it's probably not going to be exactly week 5. In fact, we can go over to your tables and confirm that week 5 is not the same amount for each one. In fact, I think it should actually be week 4, and that's just a way of using our table to kind of back up our information. So week 4 is where they should have crossed, didn't cross. I'm sorry, I was trying my best. So week 4, and it was at $130. So from that point on, his sister just had too much earning power. Will Anthony have enough money to purchase the MP3 player? When will CR? Well, keep in mind that MP3 player was $240. So $240 is going to be about in this range. So if you're looking at this, it looks like by week 8, CR would have enough, because I can track that down to week 8. And it's going to take Jaden somewhere in between week 8 and week 10, definitely by week 10, that's according to our table, before he has enough. And we can reflect that in our answer. Ciara will definitely have enough money by, what do we say, week 8. And Anthony by week 10. Can you imagine being that dude's brother and she has her MP3 player 2 weeks before you have yours? Oh! Okay. We're going to go ahead and skip that one. That wasn't assigned. Let's look at those staying sharp action here. Use the assertive property to write each form of the following expressions or an equivalent form. So this is a little bit of review. Remember, we have this repeated part that comes out in front. And then we have these two pieces using that sign in parentheses. So we have a 6 plus 10. Again, we have two pieces. That comes out in front. We have 20 and 1 in parentheses, and using that sign. Okay. Oh, one more. I'm sorry. Okay, boom. 2 out in front. L, W in parentheses. Use a sign. 2 times the quantity L plus W. All right. Find the quantity of PQ minus R over 4 when those numbers are involved. So let's check this out. We have P. We have Q. Minus something over 4, and that something is R. So we have R equals 68, we have this Q equals -3, and then we have this P going to be -8. So now we're going to do a replacement. Instead of P, let's write a -8. Instead of a Q, let's write a -3. Instead of this R, let's write a 68. It's a direct replacement. So now let's actually work this guy out. Left to right, parentheses comes first. No parentheses except this involves a multiplication. We have 8 times 3 makes 24. 2 negatives make a negative positive. 68 divided by 4. Let's work that out right here. 4 goes into 6. 4 goes into 6 once. Remainder of 2. 4 goes into 28 7 times. So 68 divided by 4 is 17. 24 minus 17, I believe, gives you a 7. Okay. Celine needs to buy ice frosting for some cupcakes. She writes this rule right. Shamir, smaller situation. Her rule C represents the number of cupcakes. I represents the total amount of icing she'll need in ounces. Okay. So how many ounces of icing will Celine use to frost one cupcake? Well, if you look at this rule that she wrote, all we had to do is determine what she gave us. She said 1 cupcake. C represents the number of cupcakes. So 0.1 times 1 equals I, the amount of icing. So 0.1 times 1 is 0.1, so she'll need 0.1 ounces of icing. If Celine needs 15 ounces of icing, how many cupcakes is she frosting? Well, in this case, we don't know C, but we do know I is going to be 15. So now the question is, well, 0.1 times some number is 15. And that number, 0.1 times some number is 15, is actually 150. So C is equal to 150. On a recent test, Mark got 6 questions out of 40 wrong. Which answer best described the percent of questions he got correct? Well, check this out. If he got 6 out of 40 incorrect. That means he's had to have had 34 out of 40 correct. Because if he missed 6 out of 40, that means that 34 he didn't miss. Now we can accomplish this problem by using a calculator and actually using this in the division sense, 34 divided by 40, although that would probably be unnecessary. I mean, we can back our calculations up using that. But if you look at our choices, we just have to answer in relative terms. So we're trying to figure out how much he got correct. Less than 50 correct. Well, 20 out of 40 would be a 50%. That's half of 40. 20 is half of 40, I should say, excuse me. So it's definitely not that one. More than 50% correct. Definitely got more than 50% correct. Less than 25%. No, because he wasn't less than 50. It would have been less than 25. And now the last part is more than 75%. Now here's where we got to do estimation. So check this out. If I take half of 40, I get 20. So 20 out of 40 would be a 50%. But if I take half of 20 again, I get 10, which that means that has to represent 25%. So I'm looking at 34, and I'm looking at 20 and 25, 50 and 25%. If I put those together, that gives me 75%, because 50 plus 25 is 75, which means these together have to give me also 75%. So a 30 out of 40 would be a 75%. That means 34 out of 70 is actually got to be more than 75%. So those are two that describes the situation well. Find a fraction that, when added to 3/8, gives you a sum of 1. Well, here's the thing. I know 8 out of 8 equals 1. So 3 out of 8 I have to add something to 3 out of 8. So I end up with 8 out of 8. Well, 3 parts out of 8 plus an additional 5 parts out of 8 would give me 8 out of 8, and therefore also give me 1. So 5 out of 8 is your answer. All right, guys. A quick homework today. Skip the middle problem. First question is heavy enough. I hope you guys hope this helped. If it did, when you remind someone, hey, they can be watching these too. And I will see you guys later.